One of the most common questions we've been getting asked right now is, what's the market doing? Is it too late to buy? Are prices going to dip anytime soon? What's going to happen? So today we're going to talk about just that. We're going to look at the overall market, see what the experts are saying, and then kind of take a little look into what we're seeing. So stick around, let's get into it. What is going on? This is Andrew with the Emerald Group. Listen, if you're trying to figure out everything there is to know about the Emerald Coast, then you've definitely come to the right channel. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, tap that little bell so that you'll be notified every single time we do a new video. And before we jump into the actual content and go over some of the stats and everything that we're seeing in the market, I do want to point out that we are a real estate company first. So if you are thinking about moving to the area, then go ahead and give us a call, text, or an email. All of our information is on the screen. We'd love to help. Now, let's jump to the computer and check out the stats. All right, now that we are sitting here in front of the computer, here are a few of the things we're going to go over. We are also going to discuss interest rate on where that is going. Hopefully, I can keep my patience a little bit to hold that until the end, so I don't go out of order here. But we can tell you about how high prices can go and what the forecast is looking at using actual numbers and studies and things like that that have been out in the world. What about those that can't pay their mortgage rates? So we'll talk about forbearance and all of that, because some people seem to think that there might be a foreclosure crisis coming, which I don't really think is happening. But again, we'll talk about all those numbers and then what the biggest challenge and opportunity is moving forward. And then again, as I mentioned, interest rates, how that works, how those are going to affect things, and then kind of go from there. So how high can prices go? So first, we're going to talk about supply and demand. And this is a very basic concept. We've all heard about supply and demand, but I want to go over exactly why the prices have been going crazy. So if you guys have been watching, if you're on Zillow, you're on trulyarealtor.com, you're on our amazing website, emeraldgrouphomes.com, you're searching stuff and you've been watching prices over the last 2 to 3 years just rise. In fact, particularly at the beginning of this year, they rose dramatically. And here's why. First, it's demand, right? The amount of homes that are needed for consumers are high because we've got historically low mortgage rates. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. They're really low, guys. Like, I know we've been hearing that. You turn on the TV, you're hearing it all over the place. They're low. Then you've got the pandemic and people working remotely. They're now wanting different things for their homes, so they want a new home. They want to get out of theirs and find the one with the office or the one with the pool in the backyard, a room for a pool or trampoline, the little bouncy house. They want a bigger yard. They've got dogs now. Whatever, they want to change their home. And then you've got the largest generation, the millennials, flooding into the marketplace. As you see here, you've got the average first-time home buyer is 34 years old. According to the Google, millennials are ranging anywhere from 29 to 39 years old, making their median age 34. It's kind of a perfect storm, right? So the millennials being the highest purchasing force in history, at least since the baby boomers. Now, I was very unclear on whether or not the baby boomers actually exceeded the number of home buyers whenever they were coming into home buying age, or if the millennials have. So I'm not really sure on that number, but point is, a lot of people coming into the marketplace, especially first-time home buyers. Then, of course, we've got supply is low. We've got an insufficient new housing construction for more than a decade. Actually, 13 years they've been behind. So I'll talk about this on the next slide, but they should have been building homes at about 1 million homes per year, and they haven't hit that. In fact, they haven't even gotten close to that yet, but we'll talk about that here again in a moment. Then we've got people that were a little bit hesitant to sell during the pandemic, right? They didn't know what was going on. Are prices going to go up, down, sideways? Am I going to be able to buy a house? There's a pandemic going on. People going to let me into their house to go look at it? Just all of that regarding the pandemic. So some people held off on putting their home on the market, which again, we've got some charts to show you that as well. And then we had less turnovers as Americans choose to stay in their homes longer. The average was around 8 years, probably about 13 years ago, and then now it's around 12. I'm actually very excited to see what that is going to look like moving forward, because I actually think people are staying in their homes a little bit longer. I think, especially since the pandemic, more people have chosen to buy a home above where they normally would for their financing capability at the time. I'm not saying that they're overbuying or that they're going outside of their reach, but just that they're trying to buy that home with the extra stuff because they're expecting, more things with the pandemic, or maybe just prepping for it. So, and then the only other thing I didn't talk about is same thing I kind of touched on. The millennial force, the largest home buying demographic, currently taking up 37% of all home purchase. That's the mass majority. I know 37 is not 50, so you look at that and you're like, well, that's not the majority. Well, according to every other type of buyer in the marketplace, Gen Zs, the baby boomers, it's just all of it, they're taking the majority. All right, moving on to our next slide. We're going to talk about this this Case-Shiller study here in a second. There were actually 3 different ones that we're going to look at. But Bill McBride from Calculator Risk says, my sense is the Case-Shiller National Annual Growth, and it's just one of the studies we'll look at, so bear with me, of 19.7%, that's the amount that it has increased year over year from July to July, again, we'll talk about it in a second, is close to its peak, and that the year-over-year price increases will slow later this year. Now, that does not mean a decline in price. What he is stating is that the fact that it was going this high, it's now going to slow, and it's going to go like this, right? Now, of course, he doesn't say that specifically, but that's what he was alluding to, as you'll see here in a second. So this is the July 2021 year-over-year house appreciation. This is 3 different studies. You've got CoreLogic, you'll see them a couple of times throughout this presentation. You've also got the Federal Housing Finance Agency House Price Index, that's a mouthful, and you've got the S&P Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. So this is what he was talking about when he says the Case-Shiller Index. All right, so this is stating 19.7. The CoreLogic says 18%, 19.2. The reason these are different is because they're looking at slightly different variables, but for the most part, they're looking at the same stuff. How much did homes appreciate from July of 2020 to July of 2021? So approximately a 18 to 19% increase. That's a huge increase in 1 year. There's no doubt about that. But that's exactly what he's referencing to. So basically what he's stating, and a lot of experts are stating the same thing, is that, well, this isn't going to continue much further. We're now starting to get supply back in to feed some of that demand, right? So we're starting to get people jumping into the marketplace, throwing their house on the market and going for their next home. And I want to talk about the demand issue that I mentioned before with home builders. This is kind of the chart to show that. You see the national average right here. I wish I had the number on me. I looked it up a couple of days ago and I kind of spaced it right now on what this average is. But basically, here's how it was presented to me and how I kind of understand it based on the research that I'm doing is, okay, we've got these red years here. This is kind of when things were ramping up, going crazy right before the crash. And then you've got the 2007, 2008 crash, and builders got a little bit scared. The problem with that was what they were supposed to be doing is building 1 million homes per year in order to keep up with the millennial demand that was about to happen. The problem with that for home builders is that then their homes sit on the market and they have to pay insurance on all of these. They have to pay all of their people to make sure that the properties are being maintained and all of that. They got to pay taxes. They've got to pay whatever their not mortgage fees, but whatever they're loaning on that, if they are loaning mass amounts or taking loans on mass amounts in order to do this. There's holding costs. That's what it boils down to. So they didn't want to, right? Like, you can't really blame them. They didn't have the demand for it right then, and their homes would have sat on the market for 8 months instead of 2. So they built just enough to keep these homes rotating. Problem with that is, if you don't forecast for the future, that causes a supply and demand issue. So at the end of the day, I'm not trying to blame anybody, but it's definitely the builder's fault. I'm completely kidding on that. But I mean, kind of. Like, as a whole, it kind of is. So they were supposed to be building about 1 million homes per year in order to keep up. As you see, they've been less than half of that in several of these years. And just now for 2022, so it's not even 2021, it's not even this year, for 2022, they're slotted to build 1.3 million permitted. So that means some more can come in as more get permitted, and then some might fall out because they didn't get quite done by December of next year. But the point is, they're finally hitting the bare minimum demand that we've needed for 13 years. Supply, demand. So I know I'm kind of beating this up a little bit, but that's to show you this is why the prices kind of went a little bit crazy and how they're going to get fixed. So in 2021, so this is December to December, this is why this number looks different. In 2021, prices rose, or should estimate and close around 11.7% in 0.74% increase for the entire year. This is December to December for easy numbers, January 1 to December 31st. I know it's December to December, but bear with me. What they're forecasting for 2022, 3, 4, and 5 is what you see on the screen, 5.82, 3.9. I'm not going to read it to you, but you get the point, is that they're still seeing an increase, just not the crazy increase that we saw before, which is a phenomenal thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm in real estate. I get paid off what the percentage price is, but it's not good for the consumer as a whole. So I'm actually very glad to see this stabilize and normalize a little bit for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to have our sellers be a little bit less in the, I don't want to call it greed mode, but there was a period there from about February on. In fact, we're still seeing even a little bit now where they're saying, well, I know that my home's only worth $500,000, but I want to try for $530,000. And for a period there, they were getting it because the supply was so low that people were just just like, I have to move. I'm moving here. I'm either going to eat a hotel for 3 months trying to find the perfect property, or I can just pay a little bit up front now and get into this beautiful home now, and it will increase over time. And they were right. The buyers that did that paid a little bit more, yeah, they paid more now, but overall their equity still increased, and it was still a proper move from that standpoint. Of course, not knowing what the future is makes it a little iffy on that. So the expected home value change from now, until 2025 will be about 32%, 31.8, right? So when you start looking at that, for the people that have been calling, we've had several, I've probably been averaging about 2 phone calls a week on what the market's going to look like, or at least the conversation leads that direction. And they're kind of like, wow, I really want to buy down there, especially a lot of our YouTube folks that are coming from different areas, which I get. You're trying to make sure that you're not buying into a market that's about to turn on you. That's never a smart move financially. So that's what stirred this video, by the way, for those of you watching and wondering why I'm talking all these crazy numbers, is because we've been having a lot of conversations with this of people going, well, I don't want to buy right now. And it's my job, I feel, or our job as as realtors in general, to let you know what the market is forecasting to look like. Nobody's got a magic 8 ball. So at the end of the day, anything can happen, right? But the numbers are pretty solid on this. It's pretty solid. That's about as much as I can say. So the people that are looking to wait because they think prices are going to decrease are actually going to hurt themselves. And year over year, it's going to keep increasing. We've got several different people that have been searching for well over a year, and they're trying to figure out, well, when's the right time? Well, it was actually a year or two ago, or in 2011, really. But you can't time the market that well. So if you guys are in the market now's a good time to get in, because I think anybody purchasing now in 10 years from now are going to be bragging about what they purchased their homes for. To put this in perspective, a 32% increase means that $300,000 home that you're on our website right now looking at is going to be $400,000 in 2025. So the prices are clearly going up, and that's clearly going to hurt you. Now, when we start adding in the interest rate changes that we're going to talk about here at the end of this, that's going to make that even worse. Your buying power is going to get almost cut in half. Well, it's rough numbers, of course. I didn't actually run that number, but your buying power is going to get hurt pretty bad when interest rates go from 3% to 5%, which is kind of the trend that we're seeing. Those are rough numbers. Please don't quote me on any of that, obviously. So what about those that can't pay their mortgage? So we talk about forbearance. The reason these are in here is because I, again, had another conversation with somebody that said, I'm waiting for all the foreclosures to happen. There's about to be a ton of foreclosures, and I'm going to go down there and I'm going to buy up one for me, and then I'm going to buy up like 10 more for rentals. And as a real estate agent, I love hearing that. Don't get me wrong, except when there's not a foreclosure crisis around the corner. So they actually sent me a link to something that said foreclosures were going to be up 49% in the next year. And I thought, wow, that's a big 49%. That's a big number. But there's no foreclosures right now. So how much is 49% really? And well, here's exactly what we're looking at. So in our marketplace, when I ran the search for this exact gentleman, I ran foreclosures, VA compromise sales, short sales. There's like 8 different categories. I ran them all. Out of the entire marketplace of, at the time, there was like 2,300 listings. There were 8 of them that fell into those categories. 5 of those 8 didn't really fall into those categories. I think the agent either mislabeled them or didn't understand what the category was. And it also included probate. So I think 2 of those 5 that I'm talking about were probate. Doesn't matter. The point is there were basically 3 actual foreclosures or VA compromise sales. So that's why I knew there wasn't a lot of foreclosures. So now we look at this number and it says foreclosures are up 49%. Well, from what number? From August 2020, there are 5,603 total foreclosures out of all the homes in America. It's not very much. August of 2021, it went up to 8,348. You are right. That is a high increase of 49%, roughly. I did kind of rough math there, so go ahead and double check it if you want. But let's take a look at 2019, 2 years before, there were 28,000. So what this company was doing, and I'm not going to name the news source that it was, but it was one of the big ones. They were fear-mongering, like typical, right? Because that gets more clicks into their website. More clicks gives more ad traffic, and that's how they make their money. I'm not mad at them for that because we do live in a capitalistic society, but I think it's misleading the public, and that part I'm not a big fan of. So it's some journalists out there that's trying to make their numbers or what have you. Okay, get it. Let's not mislead the public. Up 49% doesn't mean there's anything crazy. And when I went on to read the rest of it, they didn't give a whole lot of information on this particular article. I'm not going to bore you with all of that. The point is the amount of foreclosures happening versus what they are generally at. And 2019 is actually not a bad year. You will really want to look at bad years. Go back to 2008, 9, 10, 11, right? where that was like a good percentage of the market. So this is nothing in the grand scheme of things. And does it show a trend? Well, not really. I mean, this was COVID, right? Like, of course, there's going to be a little bit more foreclosures. But we start digging a little bit deeper, and they expected, the government in general, and a lot of the experts expected about a 30% forbearance rate. 30% of every homeowner was going to be in trouble. So about 1/3, right? The actual top at the worst of the worst in COVID, it was 8.47%. And then today, and this is a couple months ago when it says today, is down 2.62%. But out of that 2.62%, it's interesting to actually look at one step deeper. So I know I'm going really deep for y'all, but I think I have to for anybody that thinks there's going to be a foreclosure crisis, because check this out. Out of that tiny percentage, that 2.8%, whatever, out of everything that's happened, 40.8% of them paid in full completely. Out of all the forbearance period, they caught up, they paid in full. 41.4% worked out a repayment plan. They're going to be just fine. 17.9% kind of in trouble, right? 16.5% did no loss mitigation plan whatsoever. They didn't even try to work anything out, but we'll talk about that in a second, why they're not really in trouble. And 1.4% have repayment plan short sales or deed in lieu, right? Okay, I'm not going to go into that. That's such a tiny number. I'm not even going to go into what all that means. I'm going to bore you with it. But the point is, if you look at the main number, 130,000 of active forbearance plans have less than 10% equity. Less than 10% equity. Those are the ones that are actually in trouble. And that's after factoring in 18 months of deferral. So after 18 months of then deferring payments, only 130,000 people in the country were in an actual active forbearance plan with less than 10% equity. Because anybody that has more than 10% equity, even realistically 6% equity, but I'm not going to get into the nitpickiness of it, could just sell their house. Just sell it and go rent something. Like, it's very simple. If the cost of selling a home through a real estate professional and through everything is anywhere from 6 to 8%, let's say, I'm giving rough numbers. It's not what, I'm not talking commission, I'm talking total, doc stamps, taxes, like everything that you got to do. Then if you have 10% equity, you're walking away with money. So why would you let the government take that when you could walk away with 20 grand? That's essentially what this is stating, is that there's a tiny percentage of people that don't have that opportunity, but there are some. So it does hurt some people. And I'm not knocking the fact that it does hurt some people. It does, 100%. Let's not step away from that. These people need help. And there are a ton of options out there to help them. And I hope that they find their help. I really, really do. I don't like seeing people in this situation. It's not good. I saw it back in the first crash. So anyway, I'm done with that. But let's put it in perspective. Between 2006 and 2018, 9.3 million households went through foreclosure and gave up their home to a lender or sold in a distressed sale. So distressed sale meaning short sale, VA, compromise sale, probate, etc. It kind of does the whole thing. So to put that 130,000 people are possibly kind of maybe in trouble, and realistically only half of those will actively be in trouble when it really gets down to it and the foreclosure letters start happening, because some of them are going to figure it out. Some of them are even going to be households. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty. The point is, the numbers are just so skewed that there's not a problem. There's no problem happening in the future right now with forbearance, which against, some of the experts' thoughts originally at that 30% is actually kind of surprising, but in a very good way. It means people actually had the money to pay their home. People will pay their mortgage for the most part. Now, going to Ivy Zellman, the founder of Zellman & Associates, says the likelihood of us having a foreclosure crisis again is about 0%. And of course, there's a lot of experts that agree with that because of the same numbers that we just saw. There's just no indicator really showing that. So you do think there's a big foreclosure crisis around the corner. You're hoarding all of your money so you can just dump on all of these great properties and get all these great deals. Unfortunately, I think you're going to be holding onto that money for quite a while, at least until something astronomical happens, because there's just no evidence to support that. So what's the biggest challenge and opportunity right now? We're going to talk about, before we get into the interest rates, which I really do want you to hold on to. So if you guys are waiting, if you're thinking about clicking off, don't do it. I'm telling you, it's good stuff. So this is what the listings look like from 2017 to 2021. You can see each of these bars are a different year. And then you've got big old 2020 right here with this big dip for COVID, okay? Everybody was like, nope, hiding in my house. And then they never quite got back up to normal because everybody was waiting a little bit. And then now you've got the 2020 numbers, which I think there's a cool animation. Ooh, look at that slide. And it started off way lower, which is kind of different. But it kind of stayed a little bit higher, and then now it's it's a little bit lower than we'd like to see. This goes back to that supply and demand issue, but it's not necessarily anything crazy to look at. But it does show a little bit of a trend that 2 years running it's done this, and that's exactly why this quote is in here that says, when new listings in September dipping below last year for the first time in 5 months, the next month's data will yield important clues about whether or not the setback is going to be temporary or a new trend. So it's actually pretty cool to know, because if it is kind of a little bit of a new trend, then we might have more of a supply issue for a little bit longer than we thought, which means some of those estimates of the increase in price over time might actually be higher than originally expected. Now, time will tell. We don't really know on all of that. I have to wait until the experts, because I'm not an economist by any means, so I'm kind of going off their stuff here. So now we go into equity. Okay, this is why, again, foreclosure is not going to be really a big thing. CoreLogic Homeowner Equity Insights of quarter two of 2021 said that about 37% of homes are owned free and clear. They're owned outright. We've known this is a pretty consistent number for a long time. In fact, one number that isn't shown on here is that the average equity of a homeowner is somewhere around $176,000, and that was like 6 months ago, so that number's probably raised even a little bit more. But this is just home equity for mortgage holders only. The average person has gained in equity on mortgage homes about $51,500 for a total increase of 29.3%. I'm not getting into this 2.9 trillion number, it doesn't matter. I know I'm going pretty quick here, but I'm trying not to bore you guys with this. So the tappable equity, so this is the amount of 80% loan to value ratio of their home. So if your home is worth $100,000 and you own it outright, your tappable equity would be $80,000, because a bank will not let you loan more than 80% of what it's worth to protect their investment in that, or their collateral, if you will. So as you can see here, it's up higher than it has ever been in history, which again shows there can't be a foreclosure problem, because everybody has equity in their home. Don't let the bank take it, just sell it. It doesn't make any sense. There is a percentage of people that will let the bank take it and they won't short sell it. These people I don't understand, but they're out there. It does exist, but that number is going to be pretty minuscule, because who's going to do that when your option is like make $50,000 or be homeless? Most people are going to choose the $50,000 route, or whatever their number of equity is. I'm not going to go into that one, but so now we get into mortgage rates. Now this is where I kind of want to talk about what the mortgage rates look like right now. Over the last 6 years, it's averaged about 3.85%. We've been down at the 3.11%. These are conventional 30-year mortgage rates. Of course, these are not including 15 years and things like that. And of course, VA loans are a little bit lower than that. So those of you using a VA mortgage, even lower. But they're at historical lows. Like, this is crazy. If you look at the average over time, I think it's been like 8.9 or 9% or somewhere in that realm. Don't shoot me if that number is not exactly accurate, over like the last 50 years. The point is, it's much higher. Now, in some of those years, they were up at like 18, 19, 20%. So, take that with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, they were much higher. Now, I think because of the way the economy has shifted and how banks make their money, I think seeing stuff in the 8 and 9 range, it's just probably not going to happen anymore unless the banks find a different way to make their money that is then going to tip the scales and then make them want to make more of their money off a 30-year mortgage. But to be honest, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, at least on a base level. So now let's go ahead and get out of this slideshow, and I'm going to kind of show you where interest rates are going and why that's so important. So we've got the 10-year Treasury bond. This is a pretty good indicator on where the interest rate's going. Now let me explain exactly, not exactly, but kind of a vague thing on how this works. So excuse me if you already know this. So let me explain real quick on how this works. For some of you, this is going to be pretty basic, and then others, it's going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Didn't know that. So what happens is the government is pumping money into Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and they're purchasing a bunch of these mortgages, right? So that's where you get Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac backed mortgages, as you'll hear all over the place, depending on what type of loan it is, where it's going, where the money's going. There's a ton that goes into that. I'm not going to get into it, but the point is they're kind of backing these mortgages. So kind of like buying them up, right? So the bank can only hold on to so much money. So in the same way it can only hold on to so much money into its vault, the same thing is kind of true of mortgages, like semi-related. I know for those of you that are experts, you're going to be like, that's not complete. It's like vaguely related, right? So let's say a bank has $1 million and they're only allowed to hold 100,000 of it in cash, or they only have to hold 100,000 in cash. The other 900,000 can be out in investments all over the place. It's actually how they make their money. This is why the interest rates gets lowered a little bit, because before they used to make all their money from it. And now they're like, well, there's better investments out here and here and here. So we'll just throw our money in all these other places. And then in turn, we can make these other things lower, like interest rates. Now, the big thing that a lot of people misunderstand is that they hear the Federal Reserve is not going to change interest rates. Well, you're right. That has nothing to do with mortgage rates. That really has to do with, and the name is escaping me. It's anyway, it's like car notes and credit cards and, those types of credit lending style things or credit things, right? So it's not really it's not really doing anything for the market as a whole for mortgages, right? So what does have that big effect is how much money the Federal Reserve is pumping into them through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, right? So this is where we talk about tapering. When you start hearing things like the Federal Reserve is tapering off, tapering in general, that's when you're generally going to start seeing interest rates rise a little bit. So I've got a little Google search here. This is how easy it is to figure out what they're doing. You can do a quick Google search and just start seeing that, as you can see, 1101, you've got Federal Reserve start tapering bond purchases, inflation rates. I'm sure that says increase. I don't really know what the rest of it says, but whatever. And that's exactly what's happening. Inflation is increasing, so they're going to taper off their bond purchases. Federal Reserve says could gradually begin tapering the process by mid whatever. You start clicking on these and start reading through all of these. The entire point about this is, as they start tapering off, what's going to happen is a 10-year Treasury bond is going to start ticking up. As it starts happening, this kind of mimics, not directly correlated, but kind of, is going to mimic the 15 and 30-year interest rate. And this is not going to affect your 5171 arms, all that good stuff. That's a whole nother, that really goes into it. Not going to go that far, but the entire point is it is going to mimic this a little bit. So here you can see at the beginning of the year when interest rates were like crazy low, when we were like, what? People are getting like 1.9% and things like that. This is when it's going to happen. Unfortunately, some of us bought our last investment property way up here, but whatever, I'm not mad. It was still very, very low. But the point with this is, as you kind of see this, it starts rising. Now let's go ahead and scale back a little bit and look at the 5-year of all of this. As you can see, we've been low for quite a while, since about 2020, right? About mid 2020 all the way up. So we're still not even kind of catching up to what it was just in 2019, where it was around like 4%, give or take, I think is what I remember. I could be wrong on that. But the point, I mean, I could pull up my little chart here, but it's, the point is it was a lot higher. And that's kind of what this is starting to do, is they start tapering off more and more. Not as many bonds are being purchased. It starts rising, all this great stuff. So that's kind of where interest rates are going to go and why that is so important. And this is what I'm trying to hit on for those of you that have bore with me, whatever the word is for this long, is that as interest rates start rising, and then you've seen the proof that prices are going to keep rising, those two in conjunction with each other are going to make this dramatically more difficult to purchase the same property. So where this hurts people is, let's say somebody was in a $400,000 price point because of the price. Let's use $300,000 because I know these numbers a little bit better because it's about our average price point around here. So let's say you're at a $300,000 price point at 3%. Let's say that makes your mortgage around $1,600. Depending on taxes and insurance, that's a fairly kind of rough estimate. Well, as interest rates go up 1 point and then prices go up that 5%, right? So now it makes this $300,000 property a $315,000 property. Or actually, let's take this a step further to really show kind of the crossover, is let's take that 5-year mark of where it should be increasing 32%. So this $300,000 property now goes to $400,000 and the interest rate rises 1% above for the person that wanted to wait a few years for the market to cool off. That's now going to take their $400,000 mortgage, if the interest rates didn't move, would be like $2,200, but because the interest rates jumped up, it's like $2,600, $2,400, I think. 24 would actually be a little bit more accurate, but that's the point, is your mortgage is going from $1,600 to $2,400 because you wanted to wait. We could do the same thing, difference of that, 3% difference or whatever. At $300, $1,600 mortgage, $315, but the points went up half a point. Now you're looking at $2,000 mortgage. Like, the jump is very big. It's not small. For a lot of people, $400 a month is a big jump, especially when it's for your home, which is supposed to be, reasonable within a certain amount. So it takes these people, a lot of people that are, hey, I wanted to be in this area, and then now they can no longer afford that area. So what do? It's very hard for a consumer in general. It's hard for me. It's hard for all of us to go, well, I was looking at those homes and they were so pretty, but because everything changed, I got to go $50,000. I don't want those homes. Those homes aren't as pretty. I don't want those. And then so this is what the consumer generally tends to do. I do it. We all do it. Well, what if we just wait a little bit? What if the interest rate goes down just a little bit more, and then now I can afford like $275 instead of $300? So my point with this is, you kind of see the danger of this is a lot of people are going to try to wait, which is then in turn going to cause more pain down the road. So you see, with prices increasing and then interest rates increasing, it's just going to make everything a little bit more difficult. So if you've been on the fence, I'm not trying to convince you either way. When prices go up, we get paid more. I'm all for it. That's not what I want for my people. I want my people to be able to purchase at a decent price so that when we sell them, I can hand them a big fat $100,000, $200,000 check, and they can be like, you're amazing and you're great. And it's like, well, no, that was really all you because you just purchased at the right time. I don't like to tell people to try to time the market, but what I will say is don't let the market move past you. Right? When there's this much data out there, and the data is getting better and better, and it's just getting easier and easier to predict, although nothing is 100% accurate. I want to make that abundantly clear. Any of this can change. Anything can happen. But at the end of the day, there's enough information out there to show that people that are buying now are going to be bragging in 10 years. People that don't, well, they'll still be purchasing, and still buying property is generally good. I mean, what's the number? Like 97% of every millionaire was made through real estate. Like, at the end of the day, it's not bad buying property as long as you can hold through any of the dips and then purchase, and, or sell during any of the highs or vice versa. Anyway, so this was a lot of data. It was not my normal upbeat video, so please help me out here. Hit that like button down below if you've made it this far, and please, 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 to make it even better, comment down below where you visited in this area. If you have visited the Destin, Fort Walton Beach, Navarre, 30A, like the whole area from Pensacola to Panama City Beach, where have you visited, and what was your favorite thing to do? And if you haven't visited, tell me which area looks the best to you based on our videos so far. Thanks so much for watching, and see you later. See ya.